Hello and welcome to People and Profit. I'm Charles Pellegrin. This week, we'll focus on the deadline facing the European car industry. As decided by EU member states and the European Parliament, by 2035, sales of internal combustion engine cars will be banned in the bloc, thereby forcing a transition to electric vehicles. The 2022 mandate will require a seismic shift from a sector that represents 13.8 million jobs, 8% of the bloc's GDP, and 32% of its spending on research and development. A necessary shift considering that cars represent 13% of the EU's overall greenhouse gas emissions. So, how will Europe's car manufacturers manage this transition? Here to share her insights on this topic is Julia Poliscanova, Senior Director in charge of Vehicles and E-Mobility at the European Federation for Transport and Environment. Julia, thank you so much for being with us.
Hi, hello. Thanks for having me.
First off, several people campaigning in the upcoming EU elections have said they'd want to push back that 2035 deadline on banning combustion cars. What do you think of that, and how likely is that to actually happen?
Look, we are in the election time, and election times are always full of, unfortunately, short-term political plays, right? The reality is that billions or even dozens of billions have been invested by the European car industry, as well as the supply chain, battery manufacturers, for example, into Europe, to that long-term momentum. So it would be really bad economic policy to now start suddenly changing or questioning that investment agenda. And it's also just really important to stress that this is not just something we're doing in Europe. From India to Chile, the world is going electric. And we need to accelerate this transition in Europe. This 2035 goal to go full electric is actually Europe's best industrial policy for the transition. So I hope, just like the decision was taken democratically with a majority in the parliament, so we will actually keep it and just focus on implementing.
Let's get into the nitty-gritty of this transition. From a practical standpoint, the matter at hand here is to switch production lines from combustion engines to batteries, and this represents quite a shift for European car makers. At the start of the year, Stellantis and Mercedes, they raised around 4.4 billion euros to build 3 new EV plants in the bloc at the beginning of the year. Is this like starting from scratch for a car manufacturer?
So I really disagree. I actually think we just all need to remember that we are just talking about using or producing different cars, right? We're not completely changing from something to the next. This is still car making. A lot of components are still very similar. We still need steel, we still need wheels, etc., etc. What is at the heart of the matter is batteries, the battery supply chain. And this is where right now, globally, the batteries arms race is going on. We in Europe have been asleep at the wheel for many years. The Chinese have gone ahead and been preparing. The Americans are catching very quickly, and we're just waking up. So my message really is, rather than questioning the electric vehicles, as which I say are simply the future is not diesel or petrol, we need to double down on Europe's efforts to build the local battery supply chain. That means local policies, for example, stricter made in Europe requirements. That means strong EV policies for investment certainty. And that means a lot more public investment support to help that battery supply chain. Not EVs, but batteries, minerals, for example, the components to be built here. And if we do that, we have no problem transitioning, and we can do that.
Talking about this perhaps expertise gap between Europe and China and the US, who are perhaps right now the leaders in the sector, well, obviously with big brands like BYD and Tesla, is one solution for European car manufacturers teaming up with foreign brands? We saw recently Stellantis announce a partnership with a Chinese EV startup, Leap Motors.
I do believe that joint ventures that partnerships, for example, or even things like licensing agreements are quite important, because it is true that we today lack some of the expertise, and we can really get that expertise from working with other partners, for example, in China. So absolutely. But it's just really important to see what is our objective. We believe this is not about the nationality of the manufacturer. In our view, it's about the location of manufacturing. Our policy should target making local manufacturing in Europe attractive. This is what it's about. And in fact, we have the potential. So you are right. And you say that, up until now, maybe in batteries, for example, Chinese were leading. But actually, our latest analysis that we released a few weeks ago shows that Europe can be self-sufficient in battery cell technology for its own demand as soon as 2026, if we have the right policies in place. And more than half of those plants are by European companies, like Vercor in France or Northvolt in Sweden. So we can do that. We have been catching up. Now it's just not the time to question the policies, such as the 2035 decision, that have been at the heart of many of those investments taken.
Right now, the EU is conducting a probe on whether China's subsidies to its own EV sector constitutes unfair competition. Let's say that tariffs are imposed on Chinese imports at the conclusion of that probe. What's the risk there? Is there a possible negative spiral with tit-for-tat tariffs that could be applied? And what does that mean, especially when China controls such huge parts of the critical minerals supply chain that are necessary for the batteries?
Look, first of all, I think it's, what really important to stress is we in Europe are catching up, trying to build this supply chain amidst a tough global competition. We either double down on industrial policies, being brave and actually doing what we believe is right, or we go home and we import everything. And if we believe, that we should onshore this supply chain, then tariffs and some other uncomfortable measures are part of the answer. I believe that given some overcapacity concerns, for example, in China, the Chinese have just as much interest in good relationship with the European market and in being here as we have interest in their expertise. So we should raise tariffs if the investigation shows that this is reasonable, because this will create a short-term pool and business case to invest locally. Does it mean that we will not see Chinese EVs in Europe? No, absolutely not. This will mean that they will simply be building factories in Europe, producing in Europe. Tariffs on their own are not the whole answer. It's just part of the answer. The only right answer from the competitiveness point of view that in Europe we can have is accelerating electrification, not questioning policies, not slightly going back to combustion engines, but accelerating affordable, sustainable, smaller electric vehicles. This is the only way to catch up and stay competitive.
I'll stop you there just to talk about, you mentioned it earlier, the globalized supply chains. That's really one of the hallmarks of the auto industry globally. And Morocco, for instance, over the last decade or so, has become Africa's largest car manufacturing hub, serving as a construction base for the European market for brands like Renault. Yinka Oyatade takes a look at what's behind the Moroccan car industry's success and the challenges that lie ahead.
Brand new cars as far as the eye can see lined up at Renault's Tangier factory. They are just some of the French car maker's latest offerings produced in Morocco, a country quickly shoring up its position as Africa's biggest auto manufacturing hub.
It's the most competitive platform to build automotives, the most competitive decarbonized platform in the world. This is what makes Morocco attractive, and this is what made the Morocco platform grow that fastly and reach a level of 1 million capacity per year to be built by 2025.
Morocco has the capacity to produce 700,000 vehicles a year, with more than 250 auto companies operating in the North African kingdom. The booming industry now accounts for nearly a quarter of the economy, much of its success down to government tax breaks of up to 35% awarded to brands who choose to establish factories in rural hinterlands outside of Tangier. Another major incentive, lower salaries. Wages for the sector's 200,000 employees are equivalent to a quarter of those in Western Europe, attracting countries from across the globe like China.
Non seulement une bonne situation géographique.
Not only is Morocco well situated geographically, it also has a stable economic, social and political environment with a qualified and cheaper workforce.
Coûteuse.
But as the global auto sector transitions to electric, Morocco's competitive edge could be in doubt. The United States and EU are eager to bring manufacturing back home. Last year, both Paris and Washington introduced tax credits for consumers who buy electric cars made domestically.
Julia Poliscanova, I'd like your reaction here. What's the role of a place like Morocco moving forward as the auto industry moves to EV in Europe?
Look, I think it's obviously really important that we in Europe onshore parts of this value chain, but I don't think we will or need to be 100% in everything. And surely this growing new supply chain offers opportunities for countries like Morocco. The most important is that the supply chain is not concentrated on one player, that it's diverse, that it's sustainable, and it brings actually growth and opportunities to everyone. I think Morocco is really well placed. Morocco has a free trade agreement with both the EU and the US, so they are a very attractive manufacturing hub in the future for both markets. The only one thing I would caution and really add to this is that we shouldn't just allow there to be simply a race to the bottom in terms of wages or in terms of environmental standards. If Morocco is part of our value chain, if we import vehicles from there, then we should be working both with the government there, but also at the industry level, business to business, to improve the environmental and social standards so that supply chains are becoming truly better and they're bringing benefits to the average Moroccan citizens, not just to some companies.
Julia Poliscanova, you are Senior Director in charge of Vehicles and E-Mobility at the European Federation for Transport and Environment. Thank you very much for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you.
That's all we have time for this week, unfortunately. As usual, feel free to share your thoughts and questions on our social media channels. And if you want to check out our previous editions, you can search for People and Profit on the France 24 website or the podcast platform of your choice. In the meantime, thank you for watching and stay tuned to France 24.